Drivers, we need to get together, have a secret meeting. When you go to the tire test, drive at 60%.
This is the Money Lap Podcast. I'm Parker Kligerman, joined as always by Landon, Cassill. In today's episode, we're going to talk NASCAR Cup short track racing, and we're going to go a different way with this, I believe, than anyone else that you've listened to out there. So stay tuned.
We are so special, aren't we?
We
Parker?
are special. We're better. We're just better than everyone.
Unique.
All right? We are unique. My mom says so.
Because we're still going to talk about short tracks and the next gen, but we're going to talk about it in a different way than everybody else.
Stay tuned.
We're special.
I've got a question for the listeners out there, and I have a question for you, and we'll dive into this. What does it mean to be the 20th place driver in the NASCAR Cup Series? IndyCar is on Netflix now, and I've gotten some early reactions from people I did not expect. We'll dive into that. The Indy 500 Open Test just happened today as we're recording. We're recording this at 7 o'clock on Wednesday night. It happened today. We'll talk a little bit about that. And there's an F1 team that is not an F1 team that has recently shown off all the money they're spending, which is interesting, as well as some Australian Supercars news. But we start with the PR lap, Landon, where we talk about ourselves. And just quickly, I raced at Martinsville, finished 12th. That's all you need to know. All right, moving on. No, I'm kidding. It was a tough night for us in the Spike Light Cooler Chevy. My team, tough. Actually, had a huge amount of enthusiasm after practice. I felt amazing in practice. I was like, this is the best car I've ever had at Martinsville. I worked really hard on Martinsville for the last few months. I flubbed qualifying a little bit, ended up 18th. Not happy about that, but felt like if we could have the pace that we had in practice, we'd be great. We got in the race and did okay in stage one. Didn't make the headway I'd hoped, but then I sped on pit road. We went to the back. We got a tire cut down, spun out, lost a set of tires, went a lap down, fought back from that, got to the stage 3 where we actually stayed out when everyone else pitted, took the lead for a moment, became an absolute sitting duck and tried like hell to get away from the field for one corner, which I was successfully able to do on old tires. I did ask my crew chief, Patrick Donahue, I go, how many laps are on these tires when I realized we took the lead? And he goes, 70. Good luck. I was like, thanks. So we survived that. It was actually smart because we were able to put on some 30 lappers probably like 20 laps later and actually make some headway. I felt like we actually in stage 3 had a pretty fast car. We were a solid top 10 car. We just lost our track position when we had the unfortunate tire go down and spin out. And so we ended up on the last restart. I just ran the bottom, never made a move, ended up 12th. Pretty happy about that. We moved up to 7th in points. So a sloppy, rough night that had a good ending, and we continue our march forward. I think we're only 22 or 24 points out of 4th in points position right now. So we're in a good spot. Yeah. That's the recap of our race. Do you have anything you need to judge me on this week?
Well, I mean, you said you worked so hard on Martinsville for so long. I don't remember. I don't think you called me about it.
I didn't.
And then you spit on pit road
last year.
You spit on pit road. There's nobody better on pit road at Martinsville than me.
That is true.
Didn't get a call from you on that. So, where did you speed?
I sped the second zone after our box, 0.1 mile.
Where was your box?
So we had 34. The first one when it's just past the opening, went the first opening there after the corner. So you come around the corner, and then I accelerated out.
Launched too hard.
Yep.
And part of the zone, you were taking an inside. You were still on a curve, basically.
Yes.
And you were in the inside line, launching on a curve.
Not on the
launched
curve.
a little too hard.
On the straight. It was like section 6 or something.
Okay.
It was still on the straight. It's just the first. It would have been like. It's exactly what you said. I launched too hard to get. So we used third gear for those places. And I think I went too fast in second to third.
Right.
And so that screwed us.
Martinsville pit road is a fun one. The straightaways though are tough. They're tight. You can't speed.
Yeah.
No. The corners are where it's fun at Martinsville.
You make a lot of time.
I like to pit in the corners at Martinsville.
Really?
Because I think you cut some time out of your total rolling time down pit road when you pit in a corner.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should have talked. We should have set that up next time. Well, you heard it here on the Money Lap podcast. Landon is
Call me in the fall. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, he's slowly becoming my Martinsville driver coach. I could definitely use some help on the driving side. I mean, I finally figured the damn place out, I felt like, and then I just didn't get to quite show it. But there was times in the race it's like, hey, we're a top 5 car. And I'm like, why can't I do this just in the top 5? Like, what is it about this place? I've run everywhere else in the top 5. I just can't do it here. So, and I've had really good races there in trucks. I just, sometimes I have, and this one I honestly would say speed-wise was definitely one of the best there. It's just, we just had everything else happen, which you got to put races together. So
it's tough.
Yeah. Let's, if anyone, I see a lot of comments that people like when we dive into our races from the Xfinity side. So if you have more that you want us to dive into anytime, let us know. But the other way you can talk to us is through the reviews. And we're up to 152 reviews on Apple Podcast as our quest to go to 200 continues. And we have a new one here from Chilik77. They said, love it, 5 stars. Why would anyone sue the great and powerful Mohammed Ben whatever? Lol, he's talking about Mohammed Ben Sulayem, who last week basically came out with the FIA saying basically they wanted to sue anyone who talked badly about him. You are great. I love the inside talk about drivers' payouts, and I pull for Parker every Saturday. Thanks, guys. Keep up with the great work. That's nice. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. We got a YouTube comment here off of remember we discussed how to say Hyundai or Hyundai?
Oh, yeah. Hyundai.
Yeah, so Soma 9x9 here says, Americans say Hyundai, Brits say Hyundai, which I said. I like saying Hyundai. Koreans say Hyundai. According to an article I read in an automotive enthusiast mag way back when they first began importing them. Which I wonder which mag that is. Maybe I had the same ones. Maybe automobile. A mind obviously filled with little-known facts of micrometric importance. I love their ending there. And then we did have... remember, you want to reach out to us, you can send us an email at friends@themoneylap.com. We've been getting those. But we did have a tweet out there, Landon, that came towards us. And this is a question, from Brendan370ZZ. Remember if he has a 370Z. I'm late for a question for the pod, I'm sure. No, you're not. With F1 and NASCAR having no ride heights and being slammed to the ground, am I mistaken for thinking when NASCAR went no ride heights, that's when this large, dirty air issue became a thing? I know it's not the end-all, be-all, but being slammed to the ground and any air that does get underneath slows and disturbs a car, surely it would be a help, right? Ooh, that's a big one. Landon, I'll let you start.
Well, it's a great point, and I think there's a little bit of a chicken or the egg to answer that question. To me, the real issue is just overall spring rate of the car, the roll rate of the car. The ride height is kind of driving that. You kind of might have a tail wagging the dog type thing. Maybe. I know I just said chicken or the egg. Now I'm saying tail wagging the dog. But that's kind of what's going on here. I think that the issue started before ride heights, and it started when we started running stiffer springs. We started coil binding, started running bump stops. Actually, first of all, we invented coil binding in the, or not invented, but we started using coil binding in the front springs of the cars in the early 2000s. And then that kind of started this path. And the cars started getting stiffer and lower and more stable, more rigid and more platform sensitive. And then with the COT, NASCAR made bump stops legal. And by making bump stops legal, it only made it easier for teams to create rigid setup race cars, right? And then in 2013, 2014, NASCAR got rid of ride heights. So that only made it even easier for NASCAR to go a direction of stiffer, more rigid, more platform-sensitive cars. So it's not the actual, to me, it's not the actual height of the car that matters or the flow of air, because at the end of the day, you can take the car 8 inches off the ground, but if the ride heights are stiff and the springs are stiff and the tires are stiff, even though there's 8 inches worth of air flowing underneath the car, that air is still going to be directed and manipulated in a way they're going to control the platforms. To me, it's the softness of the cars that causes this dirty air issue. I think if the cars were softer, they moved more. You couldn't run stiff springs. You couldn't run bump springs or coil bind. You had to run really soft springs. I think you'd have just a huge oscillation of the car, and the aero platform would constantly be changing, and you just wouldn't feel the effects of dirty air quite like you do with a rigid and platform sensitive race car.
And the other bonus that you mentioned there with cars, if you look back pre-coil binding, and what was so amazing about those cars in the 90s and the 2000s and anything below that, basically below 2004, was how dynamic the cars were. Remember at Martinsville, they'd pick the nose up down the straightaway, they'd slam the nose down as they went in the braking zone in the corners. You saw that at road courses, you saw it all over the place, right?
Yeah.
That dynamicism, to me, that dynamicism to me is one of the things that nobody talks about, yet is completely lacking from modern day motorsports across the board in a lot of ways. And I think that made it look more exciting. You could see the drivers driving.
Yeah, and like it. So, and Clint Boyer made a comment, I think, and he was so right. Except I would want to adjust just a little bit of what he said. Where I think recently, I don't know if he tweeted it or he said it on broadcast, but he was like, get the cars off the ground, and it's like, yeah, almost. You're almost right, in my opinion, because let's not gloss over the fact that the next gen car is higher off the ground. There's more air going underneath that car than there was the previous generation car. Right, the previous generation car had side skirts, was sealed off, had a splitter. Right, the next gen actually has a notch in the front, has air moving underneath the car. The car's higher off the ground, and has actual ground clearance compared to the old car. But the problem still is that you can run really stiff springs, and the tires are stiff, and everything's stiff. So even though there's ground clearance and there's air going underneath the car, right, get the car off the ground, that's not fixing the aero issue, because then you just use that stiffness to control the platform of the car, and you're just creating a wing, right? The car is just a wing to create downforce, right? Most wings that we're familiar with, airplane wings, are meant to create lift. Race cars are a wing that's meant to create downforce. So,
yep. And this car was, remember when they first came out with it, it was all about getting it off the ground with the rub blocks.
Right,
remember?
But in my opinion, getting it off the ground alone is not the goal. Right? It's getting softer springs and softer wheel rates and softer chassis and softer tires that ultimately force you to get the car off the ground. But it's that softness that creates the dynamic race car, a car that's unpredictable, a car that's hard to control, a car that is maybe a little bit tougher to engineer and it can run in traffic a little bit better. And can change lanes and can handle and has tire fall off. That is what creates a car that has ground clearance. It's not the ground clearance itself, and I think maybe that's what we've missed. You could. Actually, here's a statement: you could not have a ride height rule, right? And just have. I talked about this on the pod several weeks ago, and just have a minimum spring rate rule, or I'm sorry, a maximum spring rate rule. Right, where the team simply can't run a spring that's stiffer than 500 pounds or 800 pounds. That right there would be your ride height rule, because the teams wouldn't be able to run a 500 or 600 pound spring in the back of the car at a high bank track and also be low. Right, the cars would bottom out,
fall over. Yeah,
right. So they would have to lift the cars up. They'd have to put rounds in it. They'd have to raise the car up to run those soft springs. And the cars would move around, and they would have an inconsistent aero platform, and you would end up having to just throw aero out the window and focus on mechanical grip.
And we should note that this whole ground effects deal is something that the global motorsports world decided was less affected by dirty air than top downforce. So if you look back 10 years ago, this discussion as aero became so prevalent, right, and so has overtaken motorsports over the last 2-3 decades, one of the things that they discovered, or at least the people that make these decisions doing the research, decided that underbody aero and down, ground effect aero was less affecting to the car behind it. So as opposed to wings and spoilers and top aero. And so that's why the next-gen car had this diffuser. That is why the F1 regs that came about in 2022 had ground effects and, the way they create downforce underneath the car as well. They all thought this was the way forward. It has not turned out to be the answer. It has concentrated it, but it has not been the answer to totally negate dirty air. Now, just to say, dirty air has existed as long as there's been aero. That is just, maybe we didn't talk about it 30 years ago. What's that? Yeah, as soon as there's been air.
As long as there's been air. So one thing I learned about this whole ground effect thing and the concentration, because you said it exactly right. You said it so perfect, is the cars are still going 180 miles an hour, right? So you didn't just magically get rid of air. That air has to go somewhere, right? It has to get pushed, squeezed, and exhausted somewhere with that car going through the air and taking up that amount of volume at that amount of speed, right? It's got to go somewhere. So in the past, this car with an inefficient aero design would just blow through this pocket of air and disperse it all over the place, right? So now we've created this underbody aero effects that we're talking about. And like you said, it's instead of dispersing it everywhere, they found ways to make the outside of the car a little bit more efficient so the air kind of attaches to the car instead of dispersing everywhere. And that's how you can see cars at intermediate tracks. That's why we love the intermediate package right now, because all you have to do is move one lane or a lane and a half outside of somebody, and because they're not dispersing air so wide like an Xfinity car or a truck, they can pull up next to somebody. But remember, like I said, that air has to go somewhere, right? It's still a big car. It's still going 180 miles an hour. Air still exists. So the air has to go somewhere. So they've channeled it underneath the car, and they're basically exhausting it right out the back of that diffuser. So it's super concentrated, and that's why the cars have this horrible, directly behind aero effect, right? And so we've sort of traded one thing for the other, and I think it's been an improvement at intermediate tracks. It's been good, but to me it still comes down to if you truly want to go back on ground effects, I think you have to go back on spring rates and wheel rates, and that's to me that's the way to get rid of ground effects and to go back on aero stuff.
Before we move on, Josh, I believe, has a question for us, our esteemed producer.
Yeah, well, I was just sitting here and I was thinking about everything you said, and I feel like from the beginning, intermediate tracks and anywhere that it's fast, that with this next-gen car, you naturally, like you were saying, you want to be higher off the ground to allow that air to enter the bottom part of the vehicle. Mm-hmm. It's been good racing, and the issues that we've been seeing have been at short tracks and road courses where speeds are not very high, and it's more, in my eyes, the mechanical grip is the issue with this car, and aero isn't as bad. So my thought is like, we've already seen them take the diffuser off and try that during tire tests, and they said it didn't really improve that. And I think mostly because it's not the aero that's the issue with this car, it's the mechanical grip with this car. Is that fair?
Yeah,
I think that's a long question.
I think it's fair. I think
it's very fair.
I think when we talk about mechanical grip, you just can't. We're making tiny changes when it's like, oh, we've adjusted, Goodyear's adjusted it, brought a new tire compound that's supposed to have more mechanical grip, right? That's not changing anything, and that should have been the biggest red flag with that should have been the All-Star race several years ago when they brought multiple tire compounds, and it turned out that the cars didn't really care. Didn't matter. It didn't matter. And so, the tire compounds matter a little bit, and we can control and manipulate the cars by a few tenths of a second here and there, but ultimately it's the fundamental of the car itself that is truly the level, is going to determine the quality of racing. And if you're looking for quality, then look no further. Then look no further than SpoilerDiecast.com, one of the fastest growing diecast and apparel high quality distributors in the industry. What sets them apart? Well, let me tell you. Distributor, is that maybe the wrong? They're a retailer. They're not a distributor.
Retailer.
They're a retailer. I messed that up. They pride themselves on exceptional service. All orders ship either same or next day, ensuring you get your hands on your favorite products in no time. We're talking about SpoilerDiecast.com for all your diecast and collectible needs in motorsports. They have over 800. No, Parker.
Nope.
No.
More than that.
We were alerted this week that they have now over 1,100 unique products currently in stock. And by in stock, I mean online, but also in their physical store in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So they've got a brick-and-mortar location, as you know. They boast one of the largest inventories in the industry. They're NASCAR-focused, but they do offer a wide range of diecast and apparel and options. That's not all. They've got dirt, sprint cars, IndyCar, F1, everything. They are passionate race fans, just like us. SpoilerDiecast.com. Check them out.
And they did alert us that we are worldwide on Money Lap, considering that we've had a pre-order for one of my diecasts come in from Germany, one last week from France, and obviously tons across the USA. So to our international listeners and fans, we appreciate you. Thank you very much. Thank you for using Spoiler Diecast. Go check out all their stuff. And, of course, as a reminder, they do have my Spike Light Cooler Chevy diecast that you can pre-order now on SpoilerDiecast.com and get a one signed by me. Use code MONEYLAP. Also, Landon, you know what I've realized? I have a great test to know if someone's insane. You want to hear it?
What's that?
I will know if someone's insane if they listen to this podcast yet have not signed up for the Pristine auction giveaway celebrating the greatest day in motorsports that we have going on. If you go to prstn.co/moneylap, you can go sign up there to win one of 4 prizes. A signed Jeff Gordon helmet by Jeff Gordon. A Charles Leclerc photo from Monaco signed by Charles Leclerc. You can get a ticket from the Coca-Cola 600 signed by Dale Earnhardt, and a Johnny Rutherford magazine that's been signed as well. One of those 4 things, celebrating the greatest day in motorsports when racing starts in Monaco, goes through Indianapolis and the Indy 500, and ends with the Coca-Cola 600. Once again, go to prstn.co/moneylap, sign up there, enter this giveaway because you're insane if you listen to this. You love motorsports, and you have not signed up for this. This makes no sense if you haven't. Also, if you're also a big-time collector or, just starting out, Pristine Auction is the choice for unique memorabilia across all sports. You will join a community that values quality, service, and scoring great wins. Use code MONEYLAP at Pristine Auction for $10 off your first win once you've gotten past our giveaway and won that as well. So go check them out, pristineauction.com, and for the giveaway, it's prstn.co/moneylap. Enter this giveaway. Otherwise, I'm going to call you insane. So, you know what? Go over there and do it. Landon, the other definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Let's talk about NASCAR. And we alluded to it in the short tracks. I'm sorry. Is there another NASCAR podcast / motorsport podcast that made that connection? I think not. So let's dive into why we believe we're different anyway in our thoughts about this. So I've seen a lot of the commentary. I've seen it for the last 2 years, basically, that, the short track racing is broken, so on and so forth. People can't pass. The cars don't fall off, and of course they don't. Like, it is a very big tire for a stock car, right? It has shifting, which allows you to get past the issues that drivers would normally have, like in our Xfinity car. You make a mistake, you can't quite get the throttle down, you can't just downshift to get more acceleration. You got to deal with it. They don't have that opportunity in the Cup car. They downshift. There's all the things we've discussed, right? At the end of the day, William Byron won this past weekend in a huge moment for Hendrick Motorsports on their 40th anniversary of their first win. 1,500 employees in attendance, all the cars in ruby red to celebrate that car back in the day, which basically saved Hendrick Motorsports. Really cool moment. You couldn't have scripted it any better, as Jeff Gordon alluded to 37 times in his post-race interview. I almost want to be like, hey, man, we should probably stop using the word script. People might get the wrong impression. But William Byron started 18th and became the winner of a race that apparently, according to everyone, you can't pass. let's dive into this. Where do we go with short track racing in the next gen era, and what are our ideas as to why, what we're seeing, how to maybe what the move forward is, and to really spin it forward to say NASCAR knows, the drivers know, everyone knows this isn't the best maybe of what we were used to beforehand, right? But if you think of the next gen car and what it has been advantageous is the mile and a half stuff, which Josh alluded to before. It has been a great car on mile and a halves. It is an excellent show. It does some incredible things that we've never seen with the lack of side force and the ability to run side by side, and the idea that the aero is so concentrated you just have to poke a nose out and you get the air and you can run a different lane, right? Short tracks, it hasn't worked. I've got ideas. I got some crazy outlandish ones, but I want to start with you as we were discussing this and sort of where do you want to go with this?
Yeah, I mean, I first off, I didn't watch all of the race Sunday. I watched the last 60 laps, and I didn't hate what I saw. It just wasn't a thriller, but it was exciting to me, especially because I picked William Byron to win. So I was pretty proud of myself there.
Well done.
But, I saw rubber being laid down on the racetrack. I saw, the preferred lane was kind of the bottom for some people, the middle for others. I think that let's not forget that we asked for everybody to be in equal equipment, and that's what we're getting. Part of that is you have everybody capable of running the same speeds, right? There is some tire fall off, but not what we hope to see, and that sort of linear fall off is, and maybe I'm pulling on a thread here that'll help me clarify something for everybody, is we want tire fall off. Sometimes we get tire fall off, but it's not like the driver can control it. It's just
not
like it's
one-to-one.
linear. It's
yeah,
just
it's not like
what I'm saying is it's just linear.
You affect it. Yeah, okay, go on.
Right, I'm just saying that sometimes fall off can be really lame because it's just linear. It's when they're stickers, you run a 20 flat, and when they have 50 laps on them, you run a 2150, and that's it. That's your tire fall off. It's what we had at Bristol was exciting because a driver could use up their tires and then have to pay the price, or a driver could save their tires and benefit from it on the long run. That is tire wear. That from tire fall off from tire wear. A lot of the tire fall off that we see in this modern day in NASCAR is just from heat, right? The tires don't really wear in a way that creates the fall off. It's more like they generate heat and they get to a certain temperature and they just keep climbing in temperature, and so the performance of the tire decreases as the temperature increases, and then you pit. That's like
we
what
saw
happens.
that with Joey Logano. So in
Right.
the first stage when he took right side tires and was able, one of the things that people call out is it was able to lead all up until the last 15 laps of stage 2 and got stage points, made a massive leapfrog forward. His left sides went 180 laps. They blistered him.
Right.
But the blister wasn't wear. It was heat blister.
Temperature.
It was
Heat.
Yeah, it was temperature. You could see
Yep.
it. It just peeled it blew a bubble in it and peeled the rubber back.
Which that just tells you that the tires are holding onto the rubber for too long, right? That's why they get hot, because the
They're not
rubber
expelling
doesn't
it.
wear. They need to shed the rubber to maintain the temperature, or to not overheat. So, to me, the cheap and easy solution. There's a lot of great fun solutions, but I'm not going to get too complicated with it. Anybody that's listening to this podcast on Thursday has probably already heard a lot of short track discussions. I would love to see horsepower. I'd love, you've heard me talk about spring rates. I would love to see all that stuff if I were in charge for a day. But man, I think that Bristol showed us what we can possibly have immediately without even increasing horsepower. Nobody was complaining about horsepower after Bristol, right?
Nope.
So
Yep.
we can do those things, I think, without even touching the engines, without touching the chassis, without touching anything. If Goodyear and NASCAR can kind of get together and figure out a way to make the tire do that at a flat track where there is no vertical load, right?
Yep.
At a Richmond, at a Martinsville. And I think that I'm not optimistic about something like that happening. But anything can happen. But the reason I'm not optimistic is because I think that it would require Goodyear to go to an uncomfortable extreme when it comes to designing and manufacturing the tire to replicate what happened at Bristol, right? The one thing you got to understand at Bristol is that track will push Goodyear to their absolute limits because of the banking and
the
and
loads
on
and the
cars.
speeds.
They would, they would have to go pretty to quite a degree to make a tire that would do the same thing at Bristol that it did at Martinsville. It's not impossible, and it's happened. So hopefully they can go that way. If we're not doing engines, we're not changing the car. If we're just going to focus on tires, I hope that they know that that's where they need to go.
And to call it out, Elton Sawyer from NASCAR did say they want to get there. That is the template of what they want to get to. That they want to get short track racing to look like Bristol, right? That level of tire wear.
So let me
hold on.
I know you have thoughts here.
Okay.
What does that look like then? Like, what does that, to me, if that's our mission, right? If Bristol is our template, right? And now we want to take that to Martinsville. We want to take it to Richmond. We want to take it to Loudon. We want to take it. What does that look like? To me, what that looks like is you're going to a tire test and you're looking for a tire that the driver at the tire test cannot make it 40 laps with.
Yep.
Right? Because remember, you got to think the tire test has limited development, limited sim testing, right? They're going to do a little bit of sim testing for it, a little bit of prep, but not the level of prep that a race would get.
No rubber laid down the track.
No rubber laid down on the track. So the tires don't ever last as long at a test as they do at the race. And so you're going to go to a driver at the test, and my directive for the driver is going to say, I want you to run good hard laps, right? Run as hard as you can. Don't worry about saving. Just run as hard as you can, good hard laps, and let's see how long the tire lasts. And if the tire lasts longer than 35 laps at the test, then it's going to last 60 to 70 laps at the race, right? And you got to keep that in mind. You got to use that to determine what do you want at the race. Because if they go to the test and the tires are lasting 30, 40, 50 laps at the test and they go, ooh, the tires are, they're wearing out at the test, so we're going to have to come back with something different, then we're right back to what we used to. You got to have the guts. I almost said something else, but I didn't really need to be. I didn't need to be crude. Goodyear has to have the gut, because ultimately Goodyear makes the call, I think.
Yep.
On what tires they want to bring to the track. They're the ones that make the tires. They put their name on them. Goodyear has to have the guts to leave a test and say, these tires could barely make 30 laps. We're bringing them back.
Let's go.
Yeah, let's
baby.
go.
Hey,
and I don't know.
go.
I just don't see that. I don't see that happening.
Hell, I would go as far as to say if any driver got out of that race where the tire couldn't make it more than 30 laps and didn't just go, thank you, Goodyear, they get fined $150,000 on the spot, not allowed to show up the next week until they pay the fine.
Here's what needs to happen. And then I'm going to shut up and I'll let you talk for a few minutes. Drivers, we need to get together, have a secret meeting. When you go to the tire test, drive at 60%. Just Sunday drive. Don't load the tire. Don't slide the tire. And then just do your long run. And they're going to be like, all right, we're going to go out. Oh, man, I did a whole fuel run at Martinsville and didn't even wear the tires out. Guess we can bring back something softer.
Yeah, you should probably just go like 150% softer. Try
just
that. See what it goes.
Yeah, you know what? I was going as hard as I could, and our lap times are slow, and there's no tire wear. Why don't you soften the tire up? Let's try that.
Dude, it's just so funny because for fans or people are listening to this, and they're thinking like, how can you as a driver feel a difference? I've told this before, but when you drove the Hoosier Arca tire that became the General Tire, and I got to do this a lot in 2010-ish, 2011. I did some tire testing for Hoosier. And then I'd get at Charlotte, and I got into the Goodyear stock, like NASCAR. And I was like, the Goodyear tire felt like I was racing on a knife edge plastic,
It's hard. It's hard to drive.
Like a brick. And then you get on the Hoosier, and I called it a gummy bear. I was like, this thing's amazing. Now, it would wear out, and it would lose like 3 seconds over a run. But you'd go off in the corner, and you felt it, and you felt it move around, and it had all this feel. Well, fast forward, many years later, I bought a Porsche 911 996, and it had these Bridgestones on it. And they were older Bridgestones. And I remember getting it, and they were kind of towards the end of their life, so I drove it around for like 2 weeks on those, and then I bought some Michelin Pilot Sports, which I'm going to go a little farther to say they're the greatest road tire basically ever. Put those on, and it was the same thing. It was like going from the brick tire to the gummy bear goo. Like, you could feel it, and you had all this sense of what it was doing, and I was like, oh my gosh, I had this like amazing recall for that moment. And tires are just, when they're right, you know it, and you feel it, and you can just tell. And there's just so many telltales of that. And, you know, this whole thing, we're going to keep talking about this until the way you just described it. Either the methodology changes and the intention changes, or it goes as drastic as what we described last week's podcast. The tire manufacturer shouldn't manufacture the tires. They should be owned by the series, because their incentive is not to create what we all want and what the fans want to see. And so until that happens, we're just not going to get the tire that we want. And so it's this seems like a runaround. Like, you talk about testing, it's like, oh, tire testing. I saw Denny Hamlin was like, I want Dale Jr. to go do the tire test. I love Dale. Love you, Denny. Totally agree. Think that'd be great. Until you change the methodology of the people who are building the tires and their incentive structure, that isn't going to matter. It just won't. Yes, you can make incremental gains, but this has been the same discussion. This is now going back 14 years we were having this same discussion, right? We're over a decade. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. We're way past that. I don't think until, the philosophy has to change. There has to be some massive change in terms of the who's building the tires, that sort of thing. Otherwise, you're going to get the same tire.
This is
not knocking Goodyear, by the way.
This is an endemic problem. Like, this is deeply ingrained.
And I don't want people to get out here and be like, wow, Parker thinks Goodyear sucks. It's not the case. They're just doing what's best for them, and I don't blame them. They are not incentivized to do what we want. And I just don't understand what their intent, how you could ever convince them. Like, why? I would sit in that boardroom of Goodyear and I'd be like, yeah, we're never going to build that tire that blows up at lap 30. Like, that's terrible.
Well, here's ultimately what happens. Here's ultimately what happens is the people that are making the decision, probably not even at these tests.
No.
Right? And all the engineers and tire manufacturers, even the executives that come to these tests or whatever, they're talking to NASCAR, they're all going to nod their heads and go, oh, yeah, okay, you like that one? You want more softer wear there, that one? That? And then they go back and they're going to make the tire that they're going to take into consideration what they heard from the drivers in NASCAR, and they're going to find the tire that they're comfortable bringing to the track to protect their brand and to grow their business that also maybe fits the parameters that the drivers in NASCAR is looking for.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
But Goodyear reserves the right to run their own business.
100%.
What do you guys think about the Pirelli situation with F1? Because they have to bring 3 different compounds, one of which is designed to wear out realistically after 10 to 15 laps in that form of racing.
Yeah, but they don't always get it right either. And we prove compounds don't matter. Like we did that with the All-Star stuff, as Landon alluded to. I think it might be an opportunity there. The multiple compound thing to me is against stock car racing. Like, that's just not how stock car racing is. You don't get in your road car and then choose from a selection of different tires every time you jump in it. It has the tires on it. So my crazy idea, by the way, speaking of tires, I think they have a fix. The next-gen tire or wheel does fit numerous performance tires out there, including ones I believe made by Goodyear, that are similar to the Pilot Sports that I put on my road cars. And why don't we just run road tires? True stock car racing. There you go. Hey, you want to promote your product? Let's just go run the road tire. See how long it lasts. People think it's hilarious. Wow, it only lasts 30 laps at Martinsville. Okay, on to the next ones. Probably be cheaper.
The only thing I don't like about that is I don't feel like treaded road tires. I've never seen a treaded road tire that laid down enough rubber on a racetrack. I'm not saying you can't make it. And maybe with a wide tire.
Yeah, you ever put on a 3,400-pound car and 36 of them and pound them around Martinsville for 500 laps? I think there'd be some depositing.
Yeah, but they shred. They need to build.
They do shred.
They don't.
They heat.
They shred. They don't build heat, right? Like, so the siping in a road tire, right? The treads in a road tire dissipates heat. So you have to. The reason a road tire is fun for the purposes that you're saying is because, they have less grip, right? The tire's going to flex more because of all the treads in it. It's not going to be as structurally like as strong, so the tire's going to slide around more with it. But it's just not going to generate heat to adhere to the racetrack when it wears out. And that rubber sticking to the racetrack when the tire wears is part of what makes the track dynamic, right? Is what makes you search around the racetrack and find different lanes. So again, not to say it's impossible and to totally shoot down the idea, but and maybe there's a level of tread that could work, right? Maybe you're adding some tread, which is going to dissipate heat, but maybe you can add rubber thickness, right? That's going to hold heat. So now you can get the tire really hot, and then if you do it with a soft compound, and that could be what creates, the tire to stick to the racetrack and adhere. So I don't know. It's interesting.
I don't know. The Goodyear Eagle F1 Supercar 3R. Bozy, I should give a shout out to Bozy Tatarevic, who I texted, by the way, Sunday when I was watching all this go down, and I just said, "Hey man, would you know if a road tire would fit on the next gen wheel?" And then he did the math for me and figured out there is a selection out there. So thank you, Bozy. And yes, I don't know. All the things you're saying are fine and dandy, but I'm like, couldn't be worse. Like, slicks to me make no sense on a stock car. Personally, I'm just like, I don't understand why it got there. Stock car racing is supposed to be road cars. It's the same thing I used to say about a spoiler and wings. I used to say, like, when you went to your car dealership and saw a sedan, this is 10 years ago, and I'd be like, did you walk in there and see a spoiler sitting in the back? No. Why do we have them? Why did it matter? Like, who cares? Why do you need downforce? Right. What does it matter? Like, I always just ask these questions like, yeah, stock car racing went that way, but why? Like, who cares?
Right.
Who does it? So, road tire, like slicks, a race tire versus just, why don't we just run the road tire? It's supposed to be a stock car anyway. We'll see. I don't know. I'm done. The short track thing, to me, I think you said it well at the beginning, though, to sum this up. And I pointed out that William Byron went from 18th to winning the race. It was possible to pass. There was a bit of moving around. Yes, it's unfortunate that a leader catches a lap down car and can't get around them, but you alluded to at the beginning, parity is what we wanted in this sport. We've gotten it. It's incredibly tight, and never has a Rick Ware racing car been close to a Joe Gibbs and Hendrick car like it is right now. Right. So guess what? You're going to have times where it's going to be really damn hard to pass a car that's exactly like your car. I'm sorry, but that's the nature of it. And I've talked to a lot of Cup drivers in the last couple weeks and had these discussions, and I want to go into a discussion I had after this. But, it's going to be damn difficult, and it's going to suck at times. And it's not going to be what you grew up thinking, like, video game style, going to drive through the pack. It's just not going to happen. Like, this is 36 really, really damn good teams with 36 really, really damn good drivers who are all going around an oval within nothing of each other. I looked at the qualifying. I was standing on pit road as qualifying was happening, and I was sitting with my picture guys, and we looked at it, and 2/10 separated, like, first to 32nd. 2/10 of a second. Where, like, come on, people. This was insanely competitive. Why do you think that's going to suddenly become half a second to a second because, he's better about driving around the track? It's like, no, come on. This is just that close. So, moving on. If you have suggestions, let us know at friends@thebuddylap.com, please. Write us an email. The discussion I had, though, Landon, before we move in the oatmeal world, and we will move in oatmeal and F1 and everything, last NASCAR thing, I thought you would have an interesting perspective on this. I was having a discussion with a Cup driver. He will remain nameless. And we were talking about Cup and how close and how tough it is, of course, and that sort of thing. And this driver said to me, he said, what I find funny is, he said, I look on social media and I see comments, and he said, I think fans believe the 20th or 25th place driver in Cup is a shitty driver. And we both laughed, and we're like, they don't get it. And it's like, this is a hard series. To get to this level is a tough thing. Now, I'm not pointing out a specific driver right now that's in 20th, 25th. I'm just saying, it's a funny thing that the Cup Series, I think, isn't always looked at like maybe the NFL, right? If you're one of the 32 quarterbacks in the NFL, you're an elite football player. in a lot of respects. You are considered to be damn, you're an NFL level quarterback. There's not many of you in the world, right? For some reason in racing, and yes, I know there's financial and that sort of stuff that can obviously shade this and blurry it and muddy the waters. If you're not, there are drivers who have made a very good living being the 21st driver for a decade, right? Probably the 21st best driver in Cup. My point being, but they are a very they're a very good race car driver. And so this driver and I were laughing about this, and I was like, I want to talk about that on the podcast. And I know you have a funny quote about this. We've also looked at this because I used to always be fascinated by those golfers that are the 100th best golfer in the world, and but they're good enough to be there, right? And they're good enough to make a great living, and they're there, and they have a value to the sport, and they might have their moments of greatness, but they're not the sustained greatness of a Tiger Woods, right? So I just think it's a funny discussion because are the fans correct or are they incorrect? Is the 20th to 25th place driver actually a really good driver?
Yeah. No, they're all really good. I still think that the guys that are absolutely on their game, right? You look at William Byron right now, Denny Hamlin, usually in the first 2/3 of a race season. Kyle Busch being Kyle Busch.
I'm sorry. What did you say about Denny Hamlin?
Sorry, I'm only saying it once.
Go on.
Guys that are on their game, I think they truly are on another level, just like any other sport, right? But what you're saying, what you said about the NFL is perfect, right? Where it's like, just the fact that you're there just shows how high of a level they are, and every single driver in that field is at that level. But yes, the golfer, I'm trying to remember the name. What in the heck was the guy's name? It is so funny.
Oh, in the Netflix doc where he says he's the 70th best golfer. Yeah, and he was like,
it wasn't a Netflix
real hard.
No, it was a guy from South Carolina. I cannot remember his name, but he's really funny. And he was referring to an interview that he had, and somebody said, you think you got a shot to win this week? And he said no. And the interviewer was like, well, what? Oh, okay. What's the mindset there? Why are you even here if you don't think that you're here to win? And he's like, they pay a lot for 20th. And when I heard that, I don't know if I ever resonated with something more in that moment.
That is pretty
Not
good.
that I didn't go to races or haven't gone to races with the intention of winning, but there's a lot of races that it's like, I don't think I'm going to win today, but I know they pay a lot of money to run 20th, and I'm sure as hell going to try to do that today.
We've both driven the Cup cars that was the goal, 20th, and it was a great day when you finished 20th.
Those are good days, man. Those are good days. And it's like I've taken my wife shopping after a lot of 20th place finishes. So, but I think, I just think that I don't know. It's just perception. You're just watching on TV. There's only 40. There's one that's first. There's one that's last. So, as a viewer, as a crude, fan in this world and social media, you got to have some yin and yang, and some person that you can point at and say that guy's awesome, and someone you can point at and say that guy sucks.
Yeah,
right. It's like I watching a basketball game with my father-in-law, and it's like somebody misses a shot, and it's like he sucks. It's like I don't know, this dude's 7 feet tall in the NBA. I don't think he's that bad. I mean,
they're paying him about $35 million a year,
right?
Yeah, but he probably sucks.
But he sucks.
I don't
know. It's all relative, but there is a level of those guys that are winning, that are doing really well. They are on another level, but I don't think that doesn't mean that Corey LaJoie isn't capable of that. John Hunter Nemechek, those guys are capable of that same thing.
Well, I believe the 20th place driver right now in Cup is, as of recording this, is Eric Jones. And to say Eric Jones is not a really high level talent in driving race cars would be a massive mistake, at least in my opinion, from everything I've seen from that guy.
Is Eric Jones elite?
I think Eric Jones could be elite had he been in the right situation.
It's possible.
Yeah. I think he could, when I think of elite in this day and age, I think of like being a Cup driver and saying, you deserve to be in Cup. Are you a driver that through the course of a season, put aside stage points or anything, just like the classic style point system, could you be in the top 16, which means playoff eligible, right? I say playoff eligible driver all the time, right? Can you do that? You can do that. You deserve to be in Cup. To me, that's the barometer. In the right situation, can you put it together to do that? If you can, to me, you deserve to be there, no doubt. So, I'm going to say it's a fun discussion, nonetheless.
One last point on it. If it doesn't tell you how, maybe if you want to use that barometer, it's like, how do those guys do on their best day? Right? That was one thing that I felt like I was, I am proud of as a professional race car driver, is just like, you know what? I've had an interesting career. I've had, good opportunities, tough opportunities. I've felt like I've had to grind through the majority of my career, right? Anybody who's followed me knows that. But I know that on my best day at every racetrack is a pretty good day, right? Super Speedway, Martinsville's intermediate tracks, road courses. Like, I've had shining moments at every single one of those venues and over the course of my career, which tells me that it's like, I know personally that I'm capable of competing at that level on my best day, right? It's the rest of your opportunity in your situation that puts it all together for a season, right? So where you could point at Eric Jones and be like, well, he was a JGR. You know what? He was, right? But JGR also doesn't have a great history of that, like, fourth driver, right? They did the same thing with Joey Logano. They fumbled, right? Eric Jones was there during a time period where he had Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex and, like these was he teammates with Martin Truex? These high-level teammates that, like, he was the fourth driver. So maybe even though he was at JGR and he had wins there, wasn't the right situation for him. But on his best day, at any given track, he's capable of all of it, right?
Yep. That's a good point.
So, there's that.
Had he been rescued? Had he been rescued
in
by
the same way that Joey Logano was?
Yeah, I mean, Logano at the time, you could point every finger there, but he goes on to win 2 championships at Penske. Just need to change the scenery. I've told that story many times where, to me, the biggest thing was, and you felt this too, but was when you're 18 years old and you join an organization, you have a lot of growing up to do. The relationship with the organization becomes far less sports and performance business and more like family. That was the situation for me at Penske, I felt like, in a lot of respects. For him at JGR, like, he grew up there, right? And the change of scenery to go to a Penske and to have that place, reinvigoration of his career, I just think that was, he got saved in a lot of respects by that opportunity.
Absolutely.
Eric, on the other hand, had to go grind it out in a, underfunded situation for years now, and has still, found himself back in victory lane at one of the hardest races there is, the Southern 500, for a team that's now on the up and up, but, he ground it out through the real dark times there. So I think that's also commendable in a lot of ways, really commendable. So you just, I think your way of putting it, for him on his best day, he wins the Southern 500. Okay, that's a pretty elite damn driver. You don't win Darlington Southern 500 not being pretty good. So let's move in the oatmeal world. IndyCar had their open test this today, actually. It got shortened by rain, but a certain guy from the NASCAR world who I would consider the best driver in the world right now, and I will fight anyone tooth and nail to say that is the truth. There is no driver that's better than this guy. Kyle Larson, second on the timing sheets. Had a toe lap, got a draft, but still, come on. What the?
That
Like-
you answered my question. I did want to know, like, because I'm going to qualify. I know how the super speedway racing is. I know practices and testing, but I don't know the flow of Indy. You know, of May and Indy, even though it's only April. What's the catch here? What's
He
the
had a
catch?
toe
So
lap.
you said it was
Yes.
a toe. Okay.
Yeah. So the big thing is they have a rating for toe versus no toe at the Indy 500, and you can basically, it's within a certain time, seconds of the car in front is giving you a toe or not. So he obviously did, and a lot of people on an open test day to start are going to do a lot of single car running and start to get their Indy cars ready. You know, these cars, the tubs that they have for this specific race are massaged for months. Like, there is no tub massaged quite like your Indy 500 car. And every bolt and piece is whittled down and massaged to the nth degree because they're trying to create every ounce of speed out of those things possible. So you want to take care of that car. So if you bring that car, obviously you don't want to risk it drafting and going fat. You know, you want to work your way up. And the other thing that happens is, like at Indy, you start at a certain downforce level and then you start to peel that downforce off as you get towards qualifying. And so it's a process. And but he still jumps in this damn thing and goes 225 miles an hour, puts it P2. Like, it's still pretty cool. I don't know.
That is wild. What's wild to me is
pretty
how
wild.
much of that is geared towards the driver, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
all about getting the driver comfortable. The cars are capable of it, right? On a cool
Yes.
weather day, like, we're going to have plenty of cool days. The cars could be in full Q trim tomorrow, and they could fire off
Yep.
and do it. But they're so edgy, and it's so hard to get it just right. It takes them a month of testing to get the drivers to start peeling that downforce out. And a rookie driver like Kyle, he probably will tank slap one at one point over the next month. I
that
would
is the fear.
imagine his team is prepared for that,
Yep.
right? I'm pretty sure
Yep.
Kurt Busch did.
He did.
Um,
He did. Off turn 2.
So it's going to happen. You know, maybe hopefully it happens earlier. I don't know. Earlier, later. Hopefully it doesn't happen at all. Hopefully he just puts it together. But gosh, you just got me excited about the Indy 500.
Well, it is so. I can't wait to watch him. And I don't want to take anything away from all the IndyCar drivers. They're elite level drivers, and I don't want anyone to have any hate. I just love seeing Kyle Larson go attempt to do something like this, and also know that he has 2 years. Like,
It's just
the fact that
great
this is
for
just
racing.
year one. It's great for racing, yeah, and it's great for them. I mean, the eyeballs that are going to come this way to see does it. You know, a lot of people, not just in NASCAR, consider Kyle Larson the best driver in the world. Okay, here you go. Here's the best driver in the world you're up against now. Like, I don't think there's anybody that does it as seamlessly and as easily as he does. You know, I really have that respect for him in that I watch him approach things, and I'll ask him questions. Like, we were walking through Darlington, I asked him this, like, how he approached turn 1. He said, I don't know. I was like, okay, I don't know. It just goes fast. And I was telling someone about, like, how we use different brake profiles at a short track versus a road course and how you would change those. And I said, now I can tell you all this, but if you ask Larson, he'd say, I don't know, I just do what's fast. It's like, okay, yep, cool.
Okay, yeah.
Great. Moving on. If you want
That's
to know
great.
more about the IndyCar drivers, the 100 Days of Indy is on Netflix. My oldest brother, texted me yesterday and said he was watching it, and it was really interesting, and he loved it. So go check it out. Was not expecting that. My oldest brother does not follow motorsports at all, other than my racing. So
And my uncle also is watching the NASCAR documentary. He came to me when he was up this last week and said, I will watch the NASCAR documentary on Netflix if you watch the golf documentary. He is not a NASCAR fan. I've invited him to so many races. Netflix effect in action.
it happens. It happens. It will continue to happen until it's proven to not happen. Landon, we said at the beginning of the show, an F1 team that's not really a team just announced all the money they're spending. Can you guess who it is?
They will not give up.
Nope. Andretti Global proudly announced the opening of a new facility at Silverstone Park in the UK. It is a new 48,000 square foot building, is an important milestone for Andretti Global as they embark on the next stage of their preparations to enter the FIA Formula One World Championship. I've read things that say that there's expansion plans for it to go as big, I think, as 110,000 square feet. They show all the people they have there at the facility that are working on this. It's not just for F1. This would be for their, basically F2 and F3 teams that they would have as well. So they are all in, and they're going after this, whether they have an entry or not. There is some rumors continually going around, although we don't like to be too rumor-based on the Money Lap. Alpine has consistently come up in rumors as a team available to possibly be sold, considering Renault is unhappy with their performance. Obviously, they're doing terribly this year. They've made major investments over the years. They had all those celebrity owners that they've brought in, like Ryan Reynolds and Patrick Mahomes, and yet the performance isn't there. They're putting a huge amount of money behind this thing, and it's never been worth more than it is right now. So I think there is some conjecture around that team could be available. So maybe that's the entry point for Andretti Global. I don't know. There would be an engine there for you as well.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. Gosh, when you describe the Alpine stuff, it just shows you like the top signal. Like celebrities buying into motorsports racing teams is a top signal of all top signals. But yeah,
they'll make money on it, probably.
I think what's fascinating here is just Andretti. From our perspective, being outsiders looking in, they just keep getting denied. Yet they're spending real money. Right.
Yeah.
This isn't just Michael getting credentials and going to 10 races a year and walking around the paddock, right? Talking about trying to buy an F1 team. He's actually building an F1 team that just doesn't exist.
Yep. Well, it doesn't have a race to race in, but it's being built.
Yeah, it doesn't have a race.
I don't know if anyone's really done this to this level. I haven't seen this. When Haas was coming in, they talked about having the facility over in England and that sort of thing, and obviously the North Carolina facility. But I'd struggle to say before they kind of knew they were getting it, they were doing that. This is wild. Like, this is a gargantuan investment across all facets to have no guarantee right now that they're going to be racing at this level. Now if in the end they were just completely denied and there was no entry point, could they flip it into a WEC program or something like that? Probably. But still, it's a pretty massive investment for no commitment yet from the F1 side. So, I think they'll find their way in there. I think if you're F1, you're going to be slapped in the face soon by the level of investment this team's making, considering you have a team on the grid who's apparently worth $1 billion that is in complete shambles after 3 major wrecks in the opening races for the Williams F1 team. Considering, just a couple weeks ago at Australia, Alex Albon wrecks. They don't have a third car or third chassis, so they end up taking Logan Sargent's car and giving it to Alex Albon because he has a great record at Australia. It was a great track for their cars. They felt like maybe that could get them some points. They didn't get that. And then Logan crashed at the Japanese Grand Prix, and they're saying that they may not have a backup till Miami. So not a good time to be at the Williams team right now. Basically, probably trying to limit their drivers. I saw some pretty stern things from James Vowles, who's the team principal, about, hey, we can't wreck these cars. And I was like, that's always a surefire way to get cars wrecked, when you tell drivers don't wreck these cars.
Or just go slow. I mean, that sucks, especially at that level. It's crazy. That's something that we're just not used to from where we come from. We're like, we got more cars than we need in NASCAR, generally speaking. The way F1 works is quite the opposite.
Yeah. We just got a thing from Josh. He said, from Chris Medland and Racer, despite the rejection announcement from the FOM, Racer understands the FIA is still working with the Andretti on its plans, having assessed its financial and technical capabilities to be sufficient for an entry. So the plot continues to thicken.
But that's the FIA.
Yeah, it's the FIA, who have been supporters the entire time.
Right.
So, maybe it's, who knows how they got that support. Last thing in Formula One, if you've probably already watched the race, Max Verstappen won, but to talk ahead into the new aero regs and such that are coming in 2026, some pretty interesting things. So essentially there's a discussion about active aerodynamics potentially being incorporated into the 2026 regulations because the simulation found that the cars were highly unstable. Two things are happening. One, they have a internal combustion engine that's limited to around like 500 horsepower, and then the EV side, the electric side, has to be not EV side, but the electric powertrain has to, or can be upwards of like 500 horsepower as well. It roughly comes out to like 1,005 horsepower, depending on when you deploy it and that sort of thing. And when it deploys, they were just having huge instability in the cars, and so they're talking about having active aerodynamics to allow. Oh, also, I'm sorry, one other thing. When you don't deploy the 500 horsepower EV side, you only have 500 horsepower, so they're really slow. So they want to talk about having aerodynamics that, basically a DRS system across the front and rear wing that then can go back to full downforce in the corners and then then trim out on the straightaways to create the speedway or the lap times and the speeds that we're used to seeing out of an F1 car. So sounds like they got a lot of work to do.
Are they basically talking about like not triggering the horsepower until the straight, like they're basically having the turbo boost on every corner or something, or what's the?
Well, you can only, basically the battery can only have so much power in it, and then it has to regenerate, just how they do now. So when you see them regenerating with the blinky light in the back, that's them regenerating the battery power. And right now, I think the internal combustion engine, Josh, you can look this up, makes like 750, 800 and something horsepower right now, the turbocharged, and then the rest is added on from the electric side. This is going to be a 50-50 split, so there's going to be times if you go down the straightaway and you only have 500 horsepower, right? Because they're going to be roughly around 1,000.
That's really weird.
Yeah, so they're trying to basically say, like, well, what if we just DRS'd everything, so then you had super low drag, so it didn't matter if you were 500 or 1,000 horsepower to go as fast. So, I don't know. It's interesting.
I'm kind of interested in this. This is venturing into a whole new form of motorsport that we're not used to, and that's what F1 is all about.
Well, and it also it's pushing the boundaries. One other thing I forgot to say that there was the alarming part was that when the rear wing was in its most low drag configuration and the engine was at full power, so around 1,000 horsepower, the car was almost undrivable, with multiple examples of drivers spinning on straights under acceleration or being unable to take the smallest of curves without the rear stepping out. That sounds kind of fun. I'd say, similar to your, that's one of those things where it's just like the tire for Goodyear. If you really want to get a tire that's going to look like Bristol, go to a test and have a tire that can only last 30 laps. So they'll figure out how to drive these.
I don't know what it felt like for those F1 drivers who couldn't control their cars, but I can tell you that I used to do straight line testing for Hendrick, and you used to have to do it. They would take the suspension out and put like really rigid struts in the cars to maintain the platform. So it was like there was struts, there was no shocks, no springs, and then it was a straight line test. And even though it was a super speedway car, so it was super trimmed out and there's not a lot of downforce, you had to get up to speed. So we had an open motor. It was an unrestricted, it's a 900 horsepower engine, and you had to launch the car from a dead stop and get it up to 200 miles an hour to like go through these traps. And those things were a handful, let me tell you. Even in a straight line.
I love it.
I've never been more terrified than trying to drive those cars straight. So no downforce, 900 horsepower, not a lot of grip. Yeah.
I was gonna say, you would think finding out the horsepower for an F1 car in this day and age would be easy to find. There are wild answers, as little as 500. This one's saying 1,000 horsepower. So
combine the 1,000. I know that between the EV and the internal combustion engine, but I think the internal combustion is 750, 850, somewhere in there. So anyway, I appreciate you looking up, Josh. Just to add to your story there, Landon, when I was at Penske, went out and did testing in the proving grounds in Arizona for the Chrysler proving grounds, and we actually unrestricted we're doing tandeming 220 miles an hour.
I did the same thing.
It was
at
terrifying.
Hendrick. We did
with
it.
A guardrail.
Justin Allgaier. I know Justin Allgaier and I did tandem drafting in Yuma, Arizona, on a 5-mile circle.
Same.
In the Chevy proving grounds.
Yep.
And it was a guardrail. It was probably the most insane thing. I'd be dead if we crashed. Dead.
Plus there was a bridge on the exit of the turn 2. It was a 5-mile oval, and there was a bridge on the exit that had no, like, you would hit the wall and you'd be done. Yeah, it was the scare. When I look back, I'm like, it was Sam Hortish and I that did it, and it was like the most dangerous thing we've ever done, for sure. So
Wow.
I emphasize. Let's talk just some global supercars news. Global supercars, Australian supercars in the global category for us. Brodie Kostecki announced he's returning to Erebus after they had the falling out. He did have another falling out now with the Boost Mobile founder, Peter Addington, who was his long-term partner, who asked him to remove his logos from his helmet because he felt like the team treated Brodie wrong, and therefore Peter didn't want to support Brodie getting back behind the wheel. This has been a major drama. I've actually wanted to find out more about this, haven't been able to, but Brodie's a friend of the show, came on the Money Lap Live over the offseason. Great guy and really informative, cool guy. So glad to see him back racing where he deserves to be, the champ from last year. Might still have a chance at the championship if he can really string together some great results. But he is back, so that's good to see.
You got that backwards, by the way. It was Erebus that wanted the Boost Mobile stuff off of the helmet, not...
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought the Boost guys asked.
No, they...
Interesting.
That was the qualification for him to get back in the seat, was to remove Boost Mobile from his helmet.
So Boost and Erebus have this beef.
Beef.
So, wow. That's really interesting.
Well, we'll see. We'll follow it. And then just a shout-out to Robert Wickens, who was hospitalized after a major incident at the Nordschleife this past weekend, but it was only precautionary, and he was excited to be heading back to the track. So cool to see him racing over there at the Nordschleife and, doing what he's been doing, which is amazing, in IMSA and over there. But it was a scary thing to see on Instagram or social media that he was, in a major wreck, but thankfully it seems like he's okay. So shout out to him. And keep on going after it in the Nordschleife. That's pretty wild stuff over there. So very cool.
Yeah.
Landon, we've been at this like an hour and 15. Shannon's cooking dinner.
I know we were supposed to keep this under an hour.
We were supposed to, and because of this, I've got to go to dinner. So Kyle Busch was in the waiting area for the pod here. We're not going to be able to get him on. I know, devastating, man. We will. I swear we will get you on one of these days, but it's just not going to be tonight. Anyway, thank you all for listening. We'll be back next week. Peace. Thanks for listening to The Money Lap. As always, check out themoneylap.com for the best 5 minutes in motorsports, or sometimes just the coolest stuff in motorsports, delivered directly to your inbox 3 times a week. Check us out on YouTube. We're growing fast over there. And, of course, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. We're all over the internet. We're spreading the word of how cool motorsports is. Check us out.